Yeah, welcome everybody to today's webinar, special webinar again for more or less 1 hour. And inside this webinar, I'm talking about some details about the integration of QF-test with Docker containers. Let me just share my screen. The first part is some kind of basics, some presentations, some background info, and afterwards I do some kind of live demo where I show you directly how this is working with QF-test and also with Docker containers. So the webinar is called What's in the Box Using QF-test with Docker Containers. And let me simply start with it. A small agenda. First, Docker what? Most of you may know what Docker is already, but there's just some small background info and introduction what Docker is about. Then I will explain you the structure of the QF-test Docker images, because we have several images which we are providing. And then after this, we have some live demo where I directly show you how to use or interact with these images, which image is used for what, and then give you some information on it. And afterwards, after the, let's say, official part, we have time for questions and additional stuff. So then let's directly start. Docker what, or what is Docker? It's free virtualization software or some kind of software platform that lets you quickly build, test, and deploy applications. Or that written here could be run on physical computers, so even my computer I'm showing right now, or in the cloud, which is then the most common use later on. And the advantage of it is that it's more resource efficient compared to virtual machines. Most of you may know virtual machines basically copy or simulate a whole desktop user machine with all the pitfalls and disadvantages, like I have need to install the whole machine, need to maintain all the Windows updates, all the security updates, all the stuff. And I also have the whole guest operating system around it with a Docker image. It's basically just the services or the necessary libraries I need to have, for example, my QF-test running or have my application running. So the image size is way smaller, and also the maintenance effort is not that large compared to normal virtual machines. And aside of this, we also get a stable and defined scalable runtime environment, because in a Docker image, I can define which parts I need to have in there, and only those parts are included in the image. There's no additional installation, no updates during runtime. I can completely be sure what is in my image. I can tell which machines can talk with this image and stuff like this. It's quite easy. But I don't want to talk about all the Docker insights or the Docker basics. It's not the topic of the webinar here. It's more like show you how you can use QF-test inside a Docker environment. And to provide this, we have several Docker images which are hosted on Docker Hub. I'll show you later on directly how to fetch them from there and how to work with them. We have basically 4 different images right now. We have the QF-test minimal image and QF-test minimal with Chrome, and then we have the interactive QF-test image and the QF-test interactive with Chrome. So basically those 4 images which we are providing for each and every QF-test release. We're also thinking about providing some, let's call it beta releases for upcoming QF-test versions, stuff like this, but it's right now in discussion. Right now it's just the fixed images for the already released versions starting from 6.0.3. And what is in this image, let me just switch to the next one. Basically it's a Docker image based upon Ubuntu base image. In this case it's Ubuntu 22 by now. And inside this base image of Ubuntu, or minimal Ubuntu image, we are installing QF-test inside there. And also there we have a browser installed. As we've seen here, we have one image, the minimal one, and the minimal one with Chrome. So basically the difference between those both is that in this one, there's already a Chrome pre-installed for web testing, for example, with all the necessary libraries, everything which is necessary to run the Chrome in there. And this one here just contains Ubuntu and QF-test itself. Then we have the interactive ones. Let me just explain this here. We decided to, let's say, provide a base image based upon in pre-installed Chrome, but the same image could be created using an Edge or a Firefox or whatever browser. The only change you need to do is like changing the Docker file a bit and remove the part where the Chrome is installed and then put in the part where the Edge is installed or the Firefox, or you can even install all three of them in one image. But the idea should be to, let's say, minimize the size of the images also for giving those faster runtime. So let's come back to the interactive image. It's basically more or less the same like the minimal images. The only difference is that here we have also a Tiger VNC server included in the image, which helps you during testing. Even in runtime, you can like connect to the Docker container which is running your test, and you can directly see what is going on in the test. It's also quite useful for debugging if you want to run an interactive session of QF-test inside a Docker container to, let's say, reproduce some issues, stuff like this. Or you can even use it to like analyze some log files or do some debugging, whatever you want to. This is basically the difference of the interactive images. So there's a VNC server included in there, so we have the real display and can connect to this display and then see what is going on in the machine and even tweak it a bit or try some stuff out. And as I said before, there's also a demo following, and as I prefer life is always better than PowerPoint, I would like to switch to, let's call it the real world. And let me just open my browser. And then let's go to Docker Hub first. So basically what you need to have this running on your machine, you basically install a Docker runtime environment, which is available through docker.com. Simply download the one of your choice up here. And if you have this installed, then it should appear somewhere on your machine. In my case, it's then up here with some kind of dashboard running in there. It's telling which containers are running, which images are running, everything which is connected to this. And then if you want to have the QF-test Docker images, go to hub.docker.com. And then in here, we simply search for QF-test. And then let's just show all of them. And here we see like the same, like we have in the screenshot, we have the minimal Chrome, the interactive and the interactive Chrome image. And here, if I go, for example, to the minimal image, we have here then some additional information, some explanation, which I already did here. What is the difference between the minimal and the interactive image? Interactive contains a Tiger VNC and also some open box window manager, which helps you to interact with the Linux box. And then for web testing, we have the minimal Chrome and the interactive Chrome image. And then also here we have some quick start and also some other steps. Let me just start with the quick start. So let's say we want to run this QF-test interactive image. We simply copy out this command line part and then open up any shell. In my case, let's just put it in this shell here. And then no matter if it's on your side, it's a Windows machine, a Linux machine, or a Mac. In my case, I'm using a Mac. And then I paste this in here, which is basically calling QF-test, calling the Docker engine. Please run a image. In this case, it's this image we want to run. And here we are also providing some kind of port because we want to access it through a VNC connection to see what is going on in the image. And if I run this the first time, then Docker is downloading this image, which hopefully goes quite fast here. I pre-downloaded the other ones, so we save some time afterwards. Let me just finish this one here. This is just done once. If you download the image of a newer version, of QF-test or newer image build, it's not necessary each and every time. The image is stored locally on your machine, and then wherever you need it, it's simply fetched from the cache. And now the image is already started. We see here there's some VNC server waiting for a desktop session. So in my case, I simply can say I start a VNC viewer. Which one you prefer is up to you. And then I can say I want to connect to localhost 59001, which was the port we provided in our terminal call. And if we do this, then we get some authentication dialog, which needs a password. The password is also in here, or let's say the default password. You can even change this to your needs. It's simply QF-test. And then we connect to it. And now we have a Linux box or VNC session running. And inside this one is a QF-test running. We see here it's trying to start QF-test right now, not finding a license, but I can show you later on how to provide your own custom license to this Docker file at Docker container. Right now, it's sufficient to run this as a demo. And then we get a QF-test started inside this Linux box. I can explore some sample test suites, let's say the JavaFX demo test suite, and then I can run this one inside this predefined Linux box. Which should bring up some demo application and then do some clicks and some text inputs in this one. Just some simple action to show that it's working. And then I can create my test, even create my tests in here, or have some tests running. And if I close this, it's also closing my Docker container and leaving it as it is. And then in my case right now, I use this VNC viewer, which I installed on my machine. If I don't have some software to connect this via a VNC viewer, there's even a way to use some web interface for it. For this, I simply copy out the part of this one here and create a so-called Docker compose file. So let's say we create a new file. And this one we save up there. So we simply paste this in here. And basically it's more or less the same. I'm telling here the Docker engine to use this specific image, QF-test minus interactive, which is then running as QF-test, and then also use some no VNC to provide some like a web interface to connect to this virtual machine or this Docker container. And to run this, I simply save this in the same folder, and then I can say Docker compose up -d, which is like some simple or standard Docker term. And then we can see here to access the container session, point your browser to this one. So even the documentation here is like some kind of step-by-step guide to guide you through and connect to this one. And here I can say, where is my Docker host running? In my case, I'm simply running the Docker host on my local machine. So it's simply localhost, could be any other IP, whatever. And then I get a VNC front end directly in the browser without the need to install some VNC server. I can even close this. And I can again connect and type in my password QF-test and send the password. And then it's looking the same. I get the Linux box here with the gray background. And then QF-test should be opened up here. Let's then double check, for example, open up the swing demo and let's this one run. One sec. Then it should also execute this one. Yeah, running as expected. And then let's go back to this one. So this is basically again, a step-by-step guide also here. To stop the container services, it's simply docker compose down, because right now it's running in the background. Now it's completely cleaned up. And this is basically right now I just started the interactive one, but there was no, let's say, not the real use of a Docker container. In my opinion, it's more like you create a test locally and with your local queue of tests. And later on, you want to run your test in a Docker container, and therefore you may need an interactive image in the container, but you don't want to connect to the one or watch the test running, because it's also time consuming, and therefore I can simply use the normal batch commands or the normal command line interface of queue of test. So basically what I want to do is run a queue of tests in batch mode, which I can tell via the -batch, and then, for example, run this predefined test suite here, like the car config en.qft, could be any other one. And if I type this in here, let me just clear this and put this in here. Then this would be running in the background, executing my whole test. Right now here, it's even telling me that there's no license file provided right now. It's not an issue because, in this case, it's not an issue because I'm running just a demo test suite, which are already have a signature, which allow them to run without any valid license. I will afterwards show you how to provide your own license to the test run. And during this is running, we can go back again here. And I provided here this -batch. So basically I told the Docker environment to run a specific image, which is this one here, the interactive image. Then I said I want to use it in batch mode. And then I provided a file. I can also provide any other command line parameter which qftest provides, like all the others, how the run log should be named, if we need to create some HTML reports, which settings we want to use. Every command line parameter you can simply add or prepend to this one or append to this one to have the same behavior like you have in your test right now without the Docker environment. This is also possible. So this was running successful right now. The problem with this command was that this one is basically just running the batch call and then running the test suites. I would get a result out of this one here, but the run log is not stored somewhere. The run log is simply stored in the image. I could later reconnect to the image or the Docker container and see what is going on in this one. But it would be easier if I have my image somewhere outside in my local file system. And to do this, it's also described in here. It's simply in here, the work here, persistence and data sharing. So let's create some folder where we store our data. And then simply run this command, which is basically the same. Just copy it in here. Only difference is that here we're providing with this -v parameter, we're providing some kind of working directory, and this one is linked into the container as the folder /workdir. And then we have the same test suite running. And if we give this some time to run and open up the folder directory already. So this one we created here. Here's our compose file, which we created beforehand. And inside this container workdir, there should be some run log appearing after the test is finished. So basically the same which is created if you have your tests running in your local installed queue of test or in any Jenkins environment or wherever. Just give some time to finish the test. think it was running a bit faster in the other session. Let me see what is going on here. There is it appearing. Now we get our queue of test run log. We could open up this with our local queue of test. Right now it's running the queue of test installed on my Mac machine, which is right now a German one, but it doesn't matter to show you how the run log looks like. And then let me just resize this a bit. And here we get our car config running with all the substeps which were running inside the test case. So all the same reporting which we get if we would run it outside of a container, we get in here. And the file is simply stored in here. And there's even a way, if you don't have QFTest installed on my machine and want to watch this run log or want to see what is going on in this run log, I can scroll down a bit here to this one, which is basically interactive usage, which opens up this file which we just created during our test run, which is opening up this one in another empty Docker container and simply loading the just created QFTest run log. Let me just use the VNC viewer. Would be the same with the no VNC. And if we go in there, we get again a QFTest. Right now with no license. And inside here, we get now our run log opened again. Right now here a bit better readable because it's now running the English version of QFTest. And then we also have here all the substeps in there. Also can activate the duration counters, whatever, can create a report out of this. I can even create a report from here and then say, please create this report in /workdir, so the HTML report, and create this one. It's created, but it's not opening up the Chrome, but it doesn't matter in this case. Just wanted to show that this HTML report is then appearing here in my local file system. And if I go there and open up the report, it's bringing up my HTML report. Right now, not that useful because the test was passing successfully. We had 7 test cases, nothing important in there, but I created the HTML report inside the container, and then the data was stored outside because it's simply reusing this container workdir, which I provided for the other one. So the most important one, or not most important one important one if you want to run your own tests is passing the license. So if you have a license locally stored on your machine and you want to provide this license inside the test run, you can pass it inside the container using this -re and then the path to your license. And then you need to QFTest to tell where it's stored inside a container, which is then put in this path. You could also, or let's say one way is always to link some photos in the container with this volume mounts. The license could be also directly copied in the container. Imagine you have the QFTest image, you use this as your base image and then copy your additional stuff, for example, your own application you need to test, some web server configuration, whatever inside the image. Then you could also provide the license file directly into the image. This one here is just showing how to mount the image, mount the license file if I have it somewhere externally. So in my case, I'm simply just copy and pasting this one. And then let me just see where my license is stored. It's somewhere here. There it is. Got here my license, and then I'm simply copying the path to the clipboard. And then putting it in here. In my case, the path has some spaces in, so I'm simply putting this into colons, and then this should be running. If I connect again to the VNC session, I get a queue of test, open it up in the container. Right now the license check is already bypassed using my own license, which we can also see here in the info dialog. Right now it's using this specific license provided in this folder, which is the one I passed into the container. So this is the, let's say, the easiest way to provide your own license to your testing environment or to your predefined container. And besides this, there's some, in this documentation, there's also some tweaks and settings which you may need later on. For example, you need to set some specific time zone, or you want to set a different VNC password. You want to have another geometry of the VNC interface. Like right now it's 1680 by 1050. Or if you want to provide another VNC port, should be also possible. And then there's even some tweaks if you have a Linux machine or even a Mac OS and don't want to have a VNC server running, you can even like mount your external desktop or your desktop into the container. This is also possible. One additional hint here, if you're running a headless Chrome, for example, there's some example call. You can use the minimal image and then say -batch to run it in batch mode, provide a variable where you say my browser name should be headless Chrome, for example, and then I can run this car config web en.qft as a test suite. If you have your own test suites running, would be the same like the one we are using when we mount in here our license file. Imagine your tests would be somewhere on, I don't know, users, gmax, temp, my tests, and then we can mount this in the container into my tests as a folder. And then if you want to use them, I can simply say here my tests, and then let's say my test abc.qft. Then this one would be run, and I'm directly mounting this into the container. It's always one way to do it like this. If you want to have fixed containers, you can simply copy in the tests before like running your container itself, like using this image which we have here as a base image, and build your own image out of this. Same we are doing in our case. We are using the Ubuntu, which I showed you beforehand, as a base image, and then put our QF test specific stuff on top. The same you can do on your side. You can use this as a base Docker image and then put your additional stuff on top. Like for example, copy your tests in there, copy the license in there, copy your own application in there, and then you have a fixed image with your stuff you need inside your testing. And then you can reproduce and even like scale your tests by using this image 10 times parallel and running this on whatever Kubernetes, OpenShift, wherever you need your Docker containers. One thing is to use locally on the machine like I've shown you here, but mainly it's then later on going into the cloud. You can then say, I want to have 10 containers using this image. And then, for example, you're also using a Jenkins, and then Jenkins is telling in the CI pipeline is telling, please bring up 3 containers with this and this specific test, run this test in this container with this image and all the stuff, which is then simply configured inside the Jenkins or any other CI pipeline to your needs. But this is then not directly connected to the QF test image here, but it's possible with this specific approach. So basically, what is the image about? It's basically a Linux-based system, a QF test based on top. In the interactive image, there's also the VNC connection in there and some additional libraries we need for running the tests in there, some base libraries, some graphic drivers, whatever. And then this image is quite simple and predefined, and you can use this to customize it to your needs later on. Afterwards, I will also like upload the presentation and also my sample files to our repository. We have some public GitLab repository where we have also put in all the other webinars, like the advanced scripting, continuous integration, and here we'll also create a folder for the Docker special webinar. And inside there, provide you with the presentation and also the Docker files, which we are using to create our own QF test images, because maybe you need to adapt it to your needs. You want to add another browser in there. You can simply use this as a sample and then adapt it to your needs. Yeah, let me think. I think it's more or less everything I wanted to show by now. Yeah. Okay, then Beata can stop the official recording and then we can continue with questions if you have some questions.